Good morning, everyone. So for me, it's kind of different to doing one of these lives in the early morning. No, early, in the beginning of the day, since I usually talk in the evening or afternoon. And here it is 10 a.m. in Stockholm, and we're talking to the Philippines today. So it's their afternoon, and for some of you, it will be in the middle of the night. So, of course, this is gonna work as a replay as well. As I said, we'll be talking to the Philippines today, and I'm really excited. We're gonna talk to Auro Chocolate. And I met them for the first time at Chocoa, and it's very excited to be able to share with you their chocolate and what they do today. And if you don't know already, that their chocolate is available in Sweden through Tzocolate. I always try. I want to say it the Mexican Latino way. Yes, and you're here watching. And you can also find it then in a couple of different shops, and they'll be developing. So you can find it, for example, at Checa Next Door, which is really exciting. So any questions you may have, you can ask them now or in the comments later. And both me and Mark, who will be joining me today, will be able to answer them here in the comments of this video. And we'll be talking for about an hour. And if you can't stay for the whole time, you will be able to watch the replay both here on my IGTV or on my YouTube channel. So you have all the options that you are needed. And of course, you can ask them now or in the comments. And we'll be waiting. Well, Mark will be joining shortly, as you can imagine. I'm always so happy to do these lives, and I'm even more grateful now because I've got light coming in from my window. It's so sad to do these lives in the evening when it's all dark outside, and then I constantly need a hot chocolate. And now I can just enjoy the, well, kind of cloudy, but still nice day. And so we've got some Filipino viewers at the moment. Do you have any questions that you want me to ask Mark when he pops into this call? We'll see. There seems to be a mismatch in the connection. There. Now. There's always something with these lives which makes it equally exciting every time. Yay!
Hi,
Hi, so good to see you.
you as well. Anna, sorry, I'm trying to figure this out really quickly.
There's always something to, it's like, okay. And it feels like it wants to do changes and trick us every time we go live. Um, so I like the challenge. Is that you never know exactly what's gonna happen when you go live.
Expected twists and turns. See
And
what happened. Hey, Sana, how is it over
it's nice, a nice kind of cold, cloudy day in Stockholm. But I'm happy it's light out and I get to do a live that is not really late. So we see lots of people joining now, and it's really lovely. And I think most people who are live right now, they know who you are. But for everyone who's going to watch the replay, this is Mark, an amazing, well, friend and chocolate maker, and based in the Philippines, making chocolate. Auro Chocolate, got one of my bars right here. And today
Hello.
we'll be listening to the story of Auro and some. Well, I know there's some new things that has happened at in the Philippines to hear about that as well, and a little bit about Filipino cacao history. So welcome.
Thanks so much, Sana, for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. And I already told the Swedish listeners before you joined that your chocolate is available in Sweden now, which is really amazing.
Yeah, we're super excited about it. And it's so nice to actually like having come visit like a month ago. Been a month. Crazy. It's really nice to actually finally see the chocolate bars as well in Sweden, and of course to like get to know more about like Swedish culture, and how many like actually how much I love it. It's so great and so inspiring. So it's really nice to do this, especially like after seeing you.
Yeah,
um, yeah, no, I'm super excited. And then we can explore how much more chocolate we can get over in Sweden, of course. um, yeah, soon, very soon.
definitely. So you have to come back and we have to do an event together physically with all of your creative bars.
For sure. And I think with the Chocolate team as well, it would be nice nice to do a bunch of things together.
They are watching now, so we've got all of the Swedish lovers
Amazing.
of Auro Chocolate listening.
Cool. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people popping in. And what I want to begin with is how did you find chocolate? How did the passion for cacao and chocolate come to you?
For sure. Yeah, I think like ultimately, so of course, like Kelly and I started this in 2015. And actually throughout the whole course of, I guess, our friendship together, we've always loved food. So like from the very beginning, crazy thing is like we didn't even meet in the Philippines. We met in Chicago when we were both studying there. And yeah, I think like we just hit it off. And then from that point, we actually ended up doing a lot of different like cooking things together. And then I think so food has been fundamentally a big part of like our relationship as best friends. And from that point, I think it was just this whole connection to our homeland. Of course, like growing up in the Philippines as well and being able to experience so much of the things here, and of course, learning more about like Filipino cacao and culture. There's so much richness in our history, and so I think that that's something that we really, like, I guess, connected with. And so from that point, when we started looking into different, like the history of cacao in the Philippines, I think it really shocked us, and we realized that, oh my gosh, there's so much potential and so many things that we could potentially do with chocolate in the Philippines. So it's crazy to think that from the point that we started in 2015, we launched our bars in 2017. I'll always remember the first time that we attended Shokoa with our little chocolate bar in little kitchen foil wraps, which was really nice. And, thinking like, oh my gosh, we have something amazing. Please like try it. Taking out our really sketchy like kitchen foil chocolate bags. It was really funny. And then to the point now that it's been like 4 years since we launched our actual products, which we're super excited about. And only even up until this point, like continuously learning and understanding the value of chocolate and cacao and how we can continually improve on its reputation, of course. And then, of course, like with a lot of more people actually getting into the industry, which is amazing for cacao farmers in the Philippines. I think that that's something that has been a really positive effect of like what's been happening here as well.
Yeah, that's the thing being a chocolate maker at origin, because you are constantly right there and you meet the people throughout the whole process.
Exactly. I think that that's the most important part, right? Like being able to build those relationships and like get people excited. And then it's always like sometimes it's very unexpected, right? Like you never know what you're gonna get, especially when you're experimenting and doing things. But then I think that that's ultimately the fun of it, right? Um, I think like you're working and working, not realizing that what you're doing actually has so many more implications to the experience. And so eventually when you're able to finally like get that taste in your mouth and you go on that flavor journey, which of course like you're amazing at, it's so nice to, you know, be able to experience and to kind of like be in that moment. um, Tasting that chocolate that you've worked so hard to kind of put together all these years.
Yeah. And in order to, well, being able to talk to the cocoa farmers about this, so they get to part of that process rather than you just bringing the finished product like, oh, look what we made. They can
Exactly.
taste the different versions and be part of the whole process.
I think that's actually a great point to bring up as well. I think that for a long time, actually, because of the history of cacao in the Philippines, right? It's been here 300 years. And if we think about it, the whole process has kind of been a mystery. I think like there was, of course, like that really famous video of like cacao farmers in Africa had never been able to taste chocolate, right? And so I think that that was something that was really interesting. Because of course in the Philippines, even if we've had cacao for 300 years, um, it's very much into our culture to actually consume chocolate, of course, in the form of drinking chocolate called tablea, and chocolate here. And so I think that that's something that is really special about the culture. And I think in relation to kind of the many different ways of infusing technology from across the world and bringing it back into the Philippines to improve and evolve from what has been existing for so long, I think is always a very interesting way to show farmers like the impacts of like what good processing can do. And I think that for the longest time, I think it has been in that way that it's like, okay, this is the process, right? This is the process and this is what we do. And here's the outcome. However, it's like when you then explain, okay, like certain things that you do during the process of fermentation will have this effect on like the cacao. And actually like all of the cacao that you have in your backyard is completely different. Um, it then like, then they're like, wait a second, what do you mean different? And then once you start turning it into something and be able to kind of giving it back into the community and having them taste the results of like the effects as well of like what those little changes you could do to the cacao and how that affects the chocolate, I think is like something that's really like very meaningful, right? Because it then shows you that, you know, there's not just one way to make chocolate. There's actually like maybe a billion ways to make chocolate, right? And that each country and each place and each origin and each farmer has so much to contribute to that overall process to really be able to deliver on that flavor as well. And so, and it, of course, like, it's always so nice to hear people like you as well, who has been in the chocolate industry for so long, like actually like pay attention to those like little nuances and like really taste those flavor profiles and those differences that ultimately make it you know, a more unique experience. That, you know, just because like, okay, chocolate from the Philippines is not the same as chocolate maybe from South America. It might have similarities, but there's so many differences as well that you could then have. And so I think that when you yourself are able to kind of be in that moment and experience it and be able to taste those flavors in your mouth, I think it makes it really like worthwhile, because then it's like, for even for us, it's like, oh my gosh, like we're not crazy. There is a difference. Right? Really nice to be able to share that experience with other people and be able to kind of compare notes and see like what differences we as tasters all experience as we taste different types of chocolate from around the world.
Yeah. I constantly, well, meet people from all over the world, but a lot of Swedish people who still don't know. They expect dark chocolate to be dark. And when I can give them 3 bars from different parts of the world, or even within the same country, same percentage, and it's like, it tastes completely different. A lot of times they're like, but what did you added something to this, or they added something to this? Like, no, it's the cacao.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's always like the fun of it, right? Because there, I think like sometimes when you talk about different tastings, sometimes it's very subtle, maybe the differences, right? And so when people try it, then they're like not completely attuned to those flavors. But when you taste something that is so drastically different, you automatically think like, oh, it's because somebody added something to this, right? But then at the same time, it's really that, no, actually, that's the difference of like cacao, that depending on the environment, depending on the origin, depending on the variety, depending on the people, um, so much of it will actually change. So it's really about just like highlighting those more unique flavor profiles and characteristics that are prevalent in the cacao itself.
Yeah. It's genetics, soil, post harvesting, that everything counts. And I think
Exactly.
so beautiful as that you said as well, that when you are able to share directly with the farmers and you can work on talking about the post harvest and trying different things together, so that everyone will see the importance of their work. So you will value their work, they will value your work, and in the long run, I think consumers will understand that how important the farmer is as well as the chocolate maker.
Exactly. I think like ultimately at the end of the day, everybody has something to contribute to chocolate. And no matter where you are in the world, there is always going to be that chain and there is going to be that connection that people have. And so it's really nice to be able to bring people together. And I think that that's something that a lot of people maybe don't realize is that chocolate is such a community driven product. That there's actually so much about chocolate that links people together, not only through the enjoyment of chocolate or the flavor of chocolate, but actually also the process of creating chocolate. And so I think that that's maybe like in a way like that's something that we are really trying to work on and really try to highlight even more, that there is this process, there is this connection to a lot of different people, right? And that in order for you to have a good quality product, you have to have a good working relationship, because ultimately you're not going to be able to improve or at least like develop certain things, right? I think like ultimately at the end of the day, it's that product of collaboration. It's that product of being able to like, grow together that makes a chocolate great. And I think that's something that we're constantly trying to work on.
Yeah, I like that. My, well, a couple of times, but some time ago, my brother asked me, like, okay, so Sana, how do you define what is a good chocolate? And I always want to add more than just flavor into the concept of good chocolate. It's like yeah, everything that you mentioned, that's what makes the chocolate great. It's there's a story to it, and I can tell that story.
Exactly. And I think like actually even the way like I think we met as well, right? It is all through that community and that chocolate. So I think like actually this whole thing has been like a great product and a great example of how chocolate really does bring people together. That there is this equal amount of learning because I think like even for myself, I've learned so much from you about so many different aspects of chocolate and even actually even in terms of chocolate makers, it's always nice to finally to kind of see as well like the different makers that you're involving yourself with and then talking about and exposing other people, so you are constantly spreading and creating that awareness for chocolate around the world, and so I think that that's definitely one of the most important things. I think that ultimately at the end of the day chocolate is about community, and that and learning. I think learning is always going to be one of the most important things to highlight when it comes to chocolate because we can't improve as an industry, even globally, right? Unless like we continue to help each other and continue to kind of um, look at each other's processes and see how we can all improve together. I think that that's something that's very important in this whole process. And so, yeah, like I want to say thank you as well to you for being one of those people who really do force other people to kind of like re-examine their perspective and also like open their eyes to the differences and varieties that are existing all around the world.
Thank you. Oh, you say the community, that's what it's all about, to help people connect and understand more from makers, consumers, putting people together. Yeah.
Exactly. I think a
And
lot of
yeah,
people in the community.
yeah.
JP and Katrine.
With anyone who's joining, please ask questions. I'll be keeping track of them. And before we dive into the questions that I have, I just like we've had so like now someone is writing "Cacosita la medicina," so like the medicine of cacao. And before that, there was a very happy comment like the Auro Pub Crawl.
Right.
Everyone who saw that have to explain this Auro Pub Crawl. That
Oh,
makes
that was.
me so happy, or did make. Maybe we'll make again in future.
I think with the changing times, of course, that was such a fun project, and it was such a fun way to collaborate with so many amazing, talented people in the food industry here in the Philippines. And so, hopefully, when everything goes back to normal, because I think like it's a very different situation, right, between Sweden and the Philippines right now. Sweden is like pretty much open, while the Philippines is not. So. I think there's still a lot of like difficulties when it comes to the overall situation during the pandemic, but hopefully more things will start to progress and we're able to actually see more movement here in the Philippines so that we can kind of further bridge the gap between where Sweden is right now and where the Philippines is.
Yeah, definitely. Because during this pub crawl, people got to follow around visiting people, or did you bring people, like all of these different places, into one space?
Right. So actually, the pub crawl was amazing. Not because like we made it, but more because the people that we worked with were amazing, and because actually the setting of the pub crawl was in this place called Poblacion, right, in the Philippines, and Poblacion. And I think like what I loved about what it represents is that um, it was a place where like younger Filipinos as well could create like more unique concepts that honored a lot of Filipino traditions. And it was very much about like, in my mind for sure, like very much about like the Filipino revival. And so I loved everything that like Poblacion represented. And so a lot of the different brands and a lot of the different people that we did know in the area who were doing amazing things, we wanted to work with. And so we ourselves didn't have like our food concept yet, right? And so what we really wanted to actually do was collaborate with the different people and give them an opportunity to experiment and play around with a diversity of chocolate, not just, of course, in chocolate as a sweet, but then chocolate as a savory ingredient. And so, so many amazing and very, very creative things were done during the bar crawl. So it's called the chocolate bar crawl. Get it? Chocolate bar crawl. um, but it was super fun. It was very, very fun. And I think like the great thing about it was that, yeah, it was like we wanted to create a chocolate experience. So it was like a degustation type thing wherein you would start off maybe with like an appetizer, but then everything was paired with like a chocolate infused alcoholic beverage. And then you would walk through the whole neighborhood. So it was very much a multi-sensorial experience. It wasn't just about like the chocolate or the food. It was really about like being in that area, being in that community, encouraging more people to talk to each other and have that sense of community surrounding like the experience. And so sometimes I feel like maybe Filipinos in general like sometimes keep to themselves. And a lot of the things that happen is that, you know, as you mentioned, I think like in Sweden as well, sometimes like people don't really want to engage or talk to each other. And so this is something that we really wanted to do to kind of push people out of their boundaries, like their comfort zones, and connect, not just through food, but then like through being in that whole situation, being in that whole environment to encourage the open exchange of communication and at the same time experiencing. So that's something we really wanted to highlight during the time of the chocolate bar crawl. So hopefully it comes back.
Yeah, and I'll be there. That's
We have,
something. And again, community creating and sharing with other. As you started talking about that you and Kelly began your journey connecting over food and flavors in general and bringing that in here.
exactly.
And we've got people loving chocolate tastings at the moment in the comments. And someone was saying that you're amazing as a brand and that during this whole pandemic situation, you've been pivoting so much. You've been able to do so many creative things. And I've been able to follow that from afar as well with creative projects and taking care of the strawberries that you told me about. So there's so many things that has happened during the last year that are positive. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, like the most important thing to highlight is that it hasn't been easy. Um, it absolutely has not been easy. And I think like, especially in this whole situation, you just have to be more adaptable because I think that there's a lot of the times, especially during the time of the pandemic, with so many different regulations changing all the time, you don't know when you're going to be able to like get new products out there or when you're going to be able to connect with those people that you were connecting with in the past, right? And so I think that this was something that we really had to keep in mind during the time of the pandemic. We knew that in order for us to stay alive, right? And I think like that was very much um, uh, um, a topic or basically like a point wherein everybody, a lot of chocolate people, a lot of chocolate makers from around of the world had to really think about because during this difficult time, a lot of people had to close down their businesses, right? And a lot of people were having main challenges. And the only way that you could actually like survive and like push forward is by adapting. And so I think that in that whole situation during the time of the pandemic, what we really wanted to do was look at everything that we had, right? Because I think like sometimes that's, I think like one of the great things about the pandemic is that it really forced us to look at what we were doing. And then from that point, we were able to actually think about the overall picture and see like, oh, okay, we need to adapt this way. We need to change our thought process. We need to see like where we're not being effective and where we are being effective. And then how can we consolidate that and actually make ourselves um, more competitive? Right? I think like that's one of the main things that we had to assess. And so there were certain projects that were definitely born out of like passion and at least like the sense of, and again, a big topic that we've had is like community. Of course, like with the gelato that we ended up launching as well here, which has been a really interesting thing because yeah, I think like we talked about it, that a lot of the times there are so many farmers that didn't have access to the market because of the pandemic. And they weren't actually able to bring their produce to a lot of different places. And so what ended up happening was that they would just throw away all of their produce and everything would just go to waste. And one of the main examples, of course, like our strawberry gelato, right, was that these farmers were about to throw away 300 kilos of fresh strawberries from some of the best places in the Philippines. And thankfully, at least like with Kelly and her parents as well, coming in to like actually go there, pick it up, and then bring it back to the bring it back, and then like basically like we've been producing it and then turning it into different like strawberry based products as well, either if it's going to be like gelato, etc. And so it's just that, it's really just that, it's that I think especially during this time, it's as a brand, of course, it's about evolution. It's always about like adapting to the situation, making sure that you're taking care of all of the people that you work with and all of the people within the company and that you're constantly interfacing with, but at the same time not forgetting your roots and where that in this difficult time it's really just about helping as many people as possible, and it's really about like helping each other, right? And so I think that this is the perfect example of don't it's not about yeah everybody's like own individual goals. It's about like our joint goals and how we can all through collaboration be able to kind of lift ourselves up and out of the situation wherein everybody has suffered, but it's really just more about how can we survive together. And I think that's definitely something that we've been trying to work on throughout this whole experience.
Really inspiring to listen to, and it's obviously come across to your consumers as well that you have been working really hard on this.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Difficult, but we're really trying.
Yeah, that's all we can do, right? To push forward and find ways to make it happen. And I love that you also connect with the way you talk a lot about traditions as well as moving forward and finding new ways. And so finding that balance in honoring traditions, thinking about history, and finding ways to move forward and honoring the ingredients and everything that is. So congratulations, very inspiring, keep it up. So people are really enjoying what you're talking about. And when it comes to this, if we reconnect, we've mentioned the history a little bit before. So it's over 300 years of cacao in the Philippines. You mentioned the drinking chocolate tablea. So obviously this connects to another country very dear to my heart. So where does the Filipino cacao come from?
Yep. I think we've talked about it, right? So it's from the Acapulco galleon trade. We have a lot of ties to Mexico. And so that's something that has been like pretty amazing in this overall process, because a lot of the times when we think about everything that's happened in the Philippines and everything that is yet to happen, right? I think that what's really important to highlight is that the Philippines has always been a collaborative country. Yes, of course, there have been like incidents of like colonialism and a lot of difficulty like throughout our history. But it's really nice to know that even throughout that, we've been able to take certain adversities or even like cultural differences and have been able to create something from there, right? So I think that that's something that's always really important to us. So like as we mentioned, like the history of drinking chocolate in the Philippines is very much tied to Mexican and Aztec culture, right? And so I think that that's something that's really amazing, because even like our word for it, which is chocolate, actually comes, or like even sicuate, sorry, comes from like the Aztec word, which is sicuatl, right? And so I think that even from that point, you can see that there's so many ways that we actually like come together. And actually, even certain things, I don't know if a lot of people know this, even in the Philippines, because I think sometimes we just associate Filipino words to be, um, Spanish in that sense. But for market, even for Filipinos, we actually use the word palenque, right? And what's really interesting about palenque is that it's not even that it's a Spanish word, it's an Aztec word, right? And so I think that's something that really shows how influenced the Philippines is and how rich the cultural um, experiences are and traditions are in the Philippines. That we share so much culture throughout different countries. Of course, like Mexico being very important to that development, but also actually so many other countries as well around us is really influences a lot of our culture that has become very rich and actually like very much surrounding chocolate.
I think it's so fascinating. And this is all of what I love, like cacao, languages, traveling, and how all of those things connect. And it's not always that easy to trace how a cacao or how cacao got to a certain place. So it's really beautiful when that's possible.
And I think, yeah, to that point, I think like it's so nice to like research on it more and actually study the history. Because a lot of the times, of course, like when we think about culture and tradition, sometimes we always just think like, oh wow, okay, like we're here, like that's our culture, that's our tradition. But the question is like, where did it come from, right? And I think that it's so interesting to actually see that connection and that history, right? It's so interesting to think like, wow, it's not even that we're talking about some of our traditions coming from another country. It's like literally coming from an even another like community and society like that's ancient, right? An ancient community, which is something that's so interesting, right? I think that that's something that's truly special to the culture. That I think like it's important to know where things have come from and how it's developed, especially within our community, and how we're planning to like pay homage to that and then take it to another place and like keep innovating and keep pushing so that at least we're constantly improving and evolving as well.
Yeah, I am nodding in like complete agreement. And I think it's a great way for people to become more open-minded, to be aware of okay, our culture, what we do is connected to what other people on the other side of the ocean, what they do and what they have been doing for history, in order to be more forgiving and for being more understanding with other people.
Yep,
Uh,
exactly. It's that's one way or the other, we all share history. And I think that that's one of the greatest things to see is that even the process of making chocolate. And I think like to that point, it's crazy, right? If we think about it, because we're talking about sharing ancient history, ancient history. And the fact is that even in the Philippines, we've had it for 300 years, and yet only, I think within the past, like maybe 10 years, was the Philippines making chocolate. So that's mind blowing in a sense, right? Because we've been growing it for 300 years, but then nobody was making chocolate. And so it's really nice for more brands now to actually be coming together to make chocolate. Um, I think like it's so interesting to see that, you know, the Philippines actually in a lot of things was the first in Asia, right? Like we were the first country in Asia to eat bread. We were the first country in Asia to grow cacao, right? There were a lot of things actually in terms of like rice culture and production that actually the Philippines had innovated on, that we were actually constantly sharing with the rest of the world. And so now when we think about like chocolate, for some reason we just stopped at hot chocolate or drinking chocolate. And it took us almost over 300 years to actually produce chocolate ourselves. So it's so mind-blowing actually, because I think like that actually goes to show that, you know, sometimes if we don't look at the origin, if we don't look at where our history comes from and our traditions come from and how those countries or cultures have evolved, then it becomes so difficult for us to then kind of move past our traditions. Sometimes like people can use traditions as a hindrance, because then it's like, okay, like I've been doing it for 100 years. Why do I change now? Right. And I think that that a lot of the times becomes the point wherein people have difficulty adapting new strategies and evolving. And I think the most important thing to highlight is that, yes, like pay homage, learn as much about our history as possible, but don't stop there, right? It's always about how do we take it further? How do we evolve past it? And how do we grow and be known for, you know, produce that has been growing in the Philippines for over 300 years, right? And so I think it's always important to um, know where you came from, and then, but at the same time, always look beyond and how we can constantly improve, because that's the only way that a country and a community will evolve into the modern day.
100%. And it connects with everything in our society as well as with cacao. I often feel like I hear this when it comes to the places where people have been growing cacao for a very long time, because they have a pride in what they are doing and they know what to do. So sometimes it can be hard for them to change what they're doing, because as if someone who doesn't grow cacao comes and tell them what to do to make it better. And that can be a hard way to talk. But if we all understand that this is what we're doing, we honor the traditions, we know the traditions, and then with current knowledge and with what the chocolate that you want to make, for example, we want to tweak the post fermentation to create a different flavor profile. And since you are there and you can work with them, so if we do this, as you said before, then it's going to taste like this. If you do it like that, it's going to taste like this. And then they are part of it. And then it's not someone saying, no, I know better. Is look at this, we can try something new.
Exactly. And I think that that's important to highlight. It's not always about better, right? I think that a lot of the times the conversation is about like pitting each other against each other, right? And I think that that's something that kind of misconstrues the message. It makes it very difficult to then comprehend like, okay, it's like, oh, we need to like cover our borders or something like this, because then they're peeking over and it's like, oh, what are they doing? And then people then become like, okay, like, I don't want you to know my process. I don't want you to see anything behind whichever. And I think that that makes people kind of like, it stops growth, right? I think that that's one of the main things that is important to highlight. It's that if you know, like chocolate isn't a secret. Like you can honestly like Google like how to make chocolate anywhere, and then you'll find so many different ways of like producing chocolate. And so I think that that's the first step into improving, right? It's that it's not about like share it, like it's a communal thing. It's not something that you have to hide because anybody can see it. It's really just about, okay, this is what you're doing. This is what you could be doing. This is what you can do as well. And then how do you then kind of tweak your process to be able to highlight different steps of the process. Sorry, I stopped speaking there for a second. But I think it's really nice because then it's that you're constantly improving. I think that that's the most important thing, right? It's not about the competition. It's not about like pitting people against each other. It's that we are all doing something special. We are all doing something worthwhile. Your output and outcome will always be different, and that is a good thing, right? And so I think that that in its essence is how we improve and constantly get better as a community, right?
Yeah.
It's about, yeah, it's not about the competition. It's about equal learning, and collaboration. That's how we'll improve.
Yeah. Leave the prestige snobbery out of it and then learn from each other. Yeah.
Exactly. Which is exactly what I love about the international chocolate community. I think that that's something that has really stayed true throughout all of these years, is that everybody has something to say and something to share. And what they have to share is always so valuable and so mind-blowing, right? I think every time we kind of have these conversations, like more things come up and more things like inspire. And then it's about then like, oh my gosh, like, wow, you can do this. I didn't know we could do this, right? So it's about then if you apply that same thing, it's not going to guarantee that you'll have the same effect as what that person was doing in another country, because you're talking about different varieties, different processes. And so if you imagine like applying that same process in your country and then trying out like what are the effects of that process, then only then will you realize, oh, okay, like this is different. But then you have to even go back to the place where you learned it from, try them side by side, see, is it really different? Is it the same? Like, what did you do? Like, and then I think it then becomes a really interesting conversation. And, I'm sure without a doubt that it'll highlight the fact that, different countries will have different results. But the methodology or the process of learning doesn't stop you from improving. It only helps you push it further.
Yeah. This is like such joy for the teacher in me to hear this. Learn from each other, but it's true. Mm, really. We had a question earlier that connects with all of what we're speaking of, with flavor profile and the history, and it was, how many varieties of cacao are there in the Philippines?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think that that's something that's really important to highlight, because, of course, the first variety that was ever brought to the Philippines and planted in the Philippines, actually in Batangas, San Jose, Batangas, was the Criollo variety, right? And so even from that point, so many more varieties and like cross-pollination and different varieties have been brought to the Philippines since 300 years ago. So honestly, like it's really hard to identify how much and how many variants are in the Philippines. Because sometimes like people only usually talk about four different like main varieties here, but actually like even through research, even like looking through the farms, you can really tell that the diversity of genetics in the Philippines for cacao is vast. And that there's still so much more that we need to learn about cacao in the Philippines in order to like truly get an understanding of what that means for us, and how many more products actually we can create because of the richness in varieties that we have in the Philippines. So that's a TBD question. We're still trying to figure that out.
And that's such an important thing to know, right? Because still a lot of people talk about, oh, there's only 3 varieties of cacao in the world. I often get those questions at my tasting. What variety is this cacao made from? Because they've been to a tasting and they learned that there's 3 varieties worldwide. And then to try to again make them change their mindset because they were so happy that they had learned this from the beginning. It's like, no, wait, we actually don't know how many there are because there's so many and cacao genetic is so complicated. So
I think like it's like if you ask them that same question, it's like how many varieties of people are there in the world? Like,
yeah,
and of course, like I think people in general are a good example. of origin, because like you never know where your heritage is, or where, like, how many countries did it take to produce you, right?
Yeah.
Goes the same with cacao, especially for a country as diverse as the Philippines. Um, yeah, I think like there's a lot of influence, and so I think in our essence, even as people, like it's a global, it's a global culture. So it's really interesting to see. Like I think sometimes it gives people comfort, right? It gives people comfort to be like, ooh, there are three main varieties, and that's it, right? And so I think it makes it very easy to digest. But then, of course, there are a lot of people then realize like, oh wow, okay, there might be three varieties, but actually there's so much more. Maybe there's like, I don't know, like wasn't it like 10 to 12 or something main varieties? Then like within those 10 to 12, there's literally like thousands of different clones and different like variations of each, and so it's so unpredictable. And so I think like even that concept, which actually like something I did want to share was that sometimes there is this conversation of like a bad variety, right?
Mm.
A lot of different places, like people talk about a good variety and a bad variety. And so I think that to me in the beginning was something very difficult um, to kind of separate as we continued to learn more, because now we realize there are no bad varieties, right? There are no bad varieties because it's really just about how you take care of it, how you process it, and how to turn it into chocolate. And so that's something I think that should be talked about more, because sometimes like when they hear, oh, it's that, then people devalue that specific variety because they think that maybe it might be more common or might be less premium or important in the overall scheme of like cacao. But actually what's really interesting is that, again, like as we've learned, really there are no bad varieties. You can make any variety taste amazing. You just have to pay attention, and you just have to focus on your process and then see how you can tweak it to bring out those like beautiful flavors that are inherent with that specific variety.
Yeah. Sounds like great hopes for the future. More conversations about this. And if we're gonna round off to think a little bit about the future, so your aspirations, where do you think cacao is going, where you want to go, and also with the cafe. There's a new project with Auro happening in Manila, and I'm sad I can't be there.
Yep. Actually, like I won't talk about it so much yet, but it is coming. We are opening a cafe, so just stay tuned to those watching. We will be announcing it within the next month or so. So it is something that's very exciting for us, because it is something that is going to be in the Philippines, which we're super excited about. And it's literally the first of what we're hoping to share. So I won't say it yet.
There's so many things happening then. Okay, this is so exciting.
Like we're very excited about it. So I think that and it's, I think, going to be like a place of learning and a place of experience and a place of like really enjoying chocolate. um and I think like the space is going to embody a lot of the things that we're hoping that the brand will kind of carry through and embody as we continue to grow as well. So we're very excited. I won't spoil it yet, but it's
No,
coming.
the, no one wants spoiler, but people always want. We want to have that. What is it, like the anticipation to know that there's something to look forward to, because that's all we constantly need, that kind of comfort. So that's really lovely. And with that, I think we're gonna finish for today, because we know we can just keep talking forever and ever about this. There's so much to say about chocolate, but I'm so grateful that you could join me today, this morning here and afternoon for you. And thank everyone for watching as well. It's been lovely to see your comments and sending out hearts. So thank you, Mark, and give a big shout out to Kelly as well. I'm so grateful that both of you are making chocolate.
You. I mean, it's been an honor and a pleasure being here. And of course, as you said, we can talk forever. So we're going to have to save it for another time. Thank everyone as well for watching. And we'll definitely like have more conversations soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you all live again soon.
Take care. Thanks, Anna. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.